Oh, so that none of that went through?
No, I think
okay.
we have it.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we are ML Elric, Detroit Free Press, with Mandy Wright here at Ford Field, the home of the Detroit Lions. We are waiting for Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson to join us. She's actually about 17 minutes overdue right now, but this is probably the busiest woman in the state of Michigan right now, because she has a responsibility for keeping track of the votes throughout the state of Michigan. We're expecting a historic turnout here in Michigan, and certainly we're hearing that the turnout in Detroit is going to be better than it has been in maybe 20 or 30 years. So there's a lot of votes to be counted, and there's a lot of questions to be answered. She hears from clerks throughout this, and Detroit clerk Janice Winfrey is done counting the votes, and we'll see if she's experiencing the same sort of a positive feeling about the way the votes are being counted throughout the state of Michigan. Again, this is a state that Donald Trump needs to carry if he is to return to the White House for another 4 years. The very, very tense election of 2016 was decided in part when those votes from Detroit were counted and Michigan's final count came down. You may remember there was a recount in Michigan that the Green Party called for that was halted because there were problems verifying the vote totals in Detroit. We expect that Detroit's done a better job counting and taking care of those votes. But my guess is there will be no need for a recount in Michigan, because we will have a clear winner. The question is, when will we know, and who will it be? And as soon as we know that, we'll let you know.
Thanks, ML. Yeah, we're definitely at Ford Field here, waiting for the Secretary of State. Very socially distanced press conference. Hey, ML, tell our audience what we saw coming in.
So when we arrived at Ford Field, we come in from the street, and we came in from a media entrance, but right next to us was an entrance that's being used by volunteers who are counting votes, poll workers, and the Detroit Lions have volunteered this spectacular facility as a place where votes will be taken. When they leave the polling place, they're put in cases, the polling books come here, and then they're verified. They're secured. People make sure the numbers match up in the polling books with the number of ballots in the boxes, and then they're secured in case there's a need for a recount. The Lions have provided their staff to help with the election. Lions employees have been given a paid day off to volunteer and to help run facilities like this, where the votes are brought in. And when they come in, at first we weren't really sure what was going on. We see people pulling little carts with these sort of old-looking blue metal boxes behind them. But then people sitting at the table who are processing things, they start to cheer. We're hearing clapping. We're hearing people say, yay! And there's an energy and an enthusiasm that these ballots that people have been waiting so long to be cast, that people are so curious about what is in those boxes, have finally arrived to a place where they will be recorded and where they will do their part to help people figure out how the vote in Detroit went. In addition to Ford Field, home of the Detroit Lions, the Detroit Pistons have made some of their facilities available for people to do the same sort of thing. Bring the ballots in, bring the polling books in, verify everything, secure them, and have them ready in case somebody wants to look at them again. And there are two other places Detroit City Clerk Janice Winfrey said are used for these processing centers. One is Greater Grace Temple, one of the biggest churches in Detroit, a very influential church. I believe she's actually a parishioner there. And the other one is Jesu, which is a Catholic church and school on the west side that is a place where people like Detroit Mayor Dennis Archer went to school before he went away to college. So, or I shouldn't say where he went to school, where he's a parishioner. So those are two very prominent places in Detroit. Those two places, Ford Field and Pistons facilities, have the ballots, and when they're done counting them, we'll let you know. As soon as they let us know, of course. But we appreciate you watching. Keep watching Freep.com for updates, and if you don't mind subscribing, we would appreciate it.
Thanks so much, ML, and we'll wait patiently for the Secretary of State to make a few comments here. See, we're socially distanced. That's how I like it. I'm sitting next to the best in Detroit journalism, Vicki Thomas from
Oh,
WWJ.
Mandy. What do you want? You want money?
Yeah, Michigan Journalism Hall of Famer sitting right here. I'm not worthy.
Make my night.
We have the best. We have the best in Detroit. I'm Mandy Wright. We're live at Ford Field waiting for Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson to address voting day in Michigan. We're at Ford Field, home of the Detroit Lions. Oh, here we go. The Secretary of State's right behind me.
Which makes me wonder what grabbed her. You know, is there some shit that jumped off?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Because it wouldn't take but 5 minutes to get here.
She's here.
Oh, here she is. Okay.
Yep.
Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson is getting ready to take the podium here at Ford Field. She's just getting a microphone attached to the lapel of her leather jacket, which she seems to be pretty cool and attired for a breezy night in Detroit. But we are hoping that she's going to tell us a little bit about turnout in the state of Michigan, maybe even project when the votes will all be counted. This state is a critical state for both candidates. Last time in 2016 it went for Donald Trump, which was the first time in a couple election cycles that Michigan turned red. We've already seen the turnout is higher than expected in Detroit. Hopefully we'll get some state projections and see what else the Secretary of State has to tell us. We expected her to take the podium about 9:30. Makes you wonder what the delay is, if there was something she had to deal with, maybe a crisis, maybe something unexpected. But she looks pretty calm, so I don't think that we're going to hear something shocking, but you know what? We'll see in just a minute. So hang on. Mandy Wright, ML Elric here at Ford Field. momentarily bringing you the Secretary of State. Well, now she's walking away, so let's see where she's going. This
An
is
interesting evening.
perhaps she's counting the ballots herself, so it'll be a while. But we'll be here.
We'll be here.
We're going to stay here till the Lions win a championship, a Super Bowl, or a game. Maybe a while.
Oh. Always the brunt of several jokes. It's a good thing I'm a Steeler fan.
Took off.
Stand by, stand by. And again, if the audio is difficult, we'll have ML Elric recap a little bit of what she says after we're done here. So stand by. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mandy Wright with the Detroit Free Press. Here we go.
Hi everyone, I apologize for our delay. There we go. Thank you all for joining me this evening here at Ford Field. I want to begin by thanking the Detroit Lions. I started this morning at the Detroit Pistons practice facility where I cast my own ballot and vote, and it's really notable to end now today here at Ford Field. It's an example of how all across this city, our sports teams have come together to be a part of the successful election we experienced today, and that is still ongoing because the polls have now closed, of course, throughout the state of Michigan. We now have begun the process of reporting out results and tabulating every vote, which, as you know, for the absentee ballots began earlier today. But behind me tonight, the Ford Field, as well as the Pistons Performance Center, will be serving as a receiving board of all the ballots that were voted in person at precincts throughout the city of Detroit today. This is historic, the first time this has ever happened, but as you can see, this facility is well suited to receive the vast majority of ballots that were voted in person today, secure them, and ensure they're ready to be protected should there be a recount or any other use for them in the days that follow. So again, I want to thank the Detroit Lions for hosting us tonight, for hosting our Detroit Receiving Board, and for the work that will happen here throughout the night as precinct workers from all across the city descend on Ford Field to deliver ballots from precincts in order to be secured. So we're going to hear a lot about winners and losers in the hours to come and in the days ahead. But I want to be crystal clear about something before getting started. The winners in Michigan today are our voters. They are our poll workers, the election workers who are working right now through the night to tabulate every vote. They are the city and township and county clerks who have again and again risen to every single challenge they have had to meet this year, working 2 or 3 times as hard as they've ever worked before under strenuous conditions to ensure that every single voter gets their vote and is counted. And again, to me, all of this is reflection. Really, to me, the winner is democracy today. And I don't mean to sound trite or cheesy, it just is true. We saw millions of people vote in our state this election. And I'm truly grateful for every single person who is part of Team Democracy making it work. I wanted to share with you some stories today from the folks around the state who really did extraordinary things to make sure every vote counted. There was Justin Roba in Ottawa County. When it looked like he was going to run out of ballots halfway through the day, he ran and printed 2,000 extra just to ensure they had enough. County Clerk Barb Myra coordinated local clerks in resources, they were able to efficiently tabulate more ballots quickly than ever before. Tina Martin in Rochester Hills, a local clerk who deputized staff to take emergency ballots to residents of hospitals, including one who gave birth today in Royal Oak, Beaumont. And I just came from Detroit's Absentee County Board, where under the leadership of City Clerk Janet Springfree, thousands of highly trained election workers are working right now and worked throughout today and even yesterday, and will continue working through the night to efficiently tabulate nearly 180,000 absentee ballots that were voted in the city of Detroit, and that number may continue to increase as we continue to see the return of ballots from satellite offices and drop boxes that were utilized throughout the day. Already, 120,000 of those ballots have been tabulated today alone since 7 a.m., which is extraordinary and really puts us on track to see our results much sooner than we ever anticipated. Because all around the state today, our clerks went above and beyond to make sure that every single vote was counted and every voice was heard. They were assisted by tens of thousands of election workers who throughout today worked to ensure every precinct opened on time at 7 a.m., was fully staffed, and was ready to receive voters. And so what was it like for our voters today? While polling locations were islands of calm with a steady stream of citizens casting ballots throughout the day. There were times throughout the state where a lot of voters would show up at once, and so you'd see a line. But by no means did we see long lines throughout the state of Michigan today, which was not a victory for democracy. What we saw instead were citizens from both sides of the aisle respecting the process, respecting each other, wearing a mask to stay safe, observing but not disrupting the counting and voting process. It was really an inspiring thing to see, and to know that all around the state, citizens were coming together just simply to ensure every vote was counted and every voice was heard. Absentee county boards throughout the state efficiently processed and tabulated a record number of absentee ballots, putting us on track to be in a position to potentially see a full result of every tabulation out of Michigan in the next 24 hours, which is very exciting. Voters turned out in record numbers today in Michigan, shattering past turnout records. Thus far, we know that 3.3 million ballots were voted absentee. But as I mentioned earlier, more are coming in as we speak. The deadline is 8 p.m. at the drop box or at the local clerk, so we anticipate that number may grow even more, close to the 3.5 million that were ultimately requested by ballots. But we're already seeing a high percentage of those ballots in the clerk's hands, reported in, and beginning to be tabulated, which is another great thing to see. This part is, in terms of in-person turnout, we're still getting those numbers from our precincts, from local clerks throughout the state, so we'll know more in the hours ahead of how many people voted in person today. We know, again, turnout was about what we expected, between 2 and 2.5 million voters, but we will know more specific numbers as we get more reports from our local clerks and our county clerks in the hours ahead. Also extraordinary was that in-person voter registration exceeded 28,000 today. 28,000 citizens, eligible citizens, registered to vote and voted today. Another extraordinary indicator that our democracy is healthy, that people participated, that this election in Michigan will be an accurate reflection of the will of the people. Notably, a lot of those folks registering in person did so here in Detroit. Many did in Ann Arbor, many did in Grand Rapids. Those were the three areas of the state where we saw the largest number of voter registration today. But it's, again, a testament to voters throughout the state that so many were able to participate, and the clerks who made that all happen. Now, a lot of you know I'm a data person, and so we're going to get a lot more data in the next 24 hours. And like all of you and folks all across the country, we're going to be looking at the numbers and focusing on data. As every hour passes, we expect to get more data in, more information in. And so I'm really here tonight to ask you all to be patient. We're going to count every single vote in the state of Michigan. No matter how long it takes, no matter what candidates say, we're going to work methodically and meticulously to count every single ballot, and that, and only that, will determine who wins every race on the ballot in the state of Michigan. We know there's going to be a lot of speculation about this work that we're engaged in to tabulate every valid vote in the hours ahead. So here's the deal. My administration spent the past 22 months preparing for this election. We strengthened the security of our election system, implementing data-driven best practices, and putting in place an infrastructure to ensure Every Michigan voter knows their rights and how to exercise them. We provided our clerks the physical and financial resources they needed to ensure every polling location today was open and safely staffed, while also enabling them to safely and accurately count the incredible number of absentee ballots that they are currently tabulating. We implemented voter education efforts and programs. We did outreach to communities in dozens of languages. We did outreach to communities in low turnout areas to better understand the obstacles they face and try to overcome them. That work paid off for the numbers I just shared. Reports from our team members deployed throughout the state today were universally showing that things went incredibly smooth. Where there was an issue, it was resolved quickly. Voters who needed assistance were directed to where they could receive it. Polling places remained healthy and calm places for people to go. And the tireless work of our clerks all across the state made this possible. So we witnessed and experienced history today. There's no question to me that this was a success. The democracy won the day, that our voters and our clerks should all be proud of the work we've done together. So now what's important is that we continue to work together to ensure truth and accurate information guides us in the days ahead. Bad actors sought to misinform our voters about their rights today. We saw robocalls, we saw text messages trying to confuse citizens about whether or not they could vote and whether or not they were eligible to vote. But none of that had an intended effect, because our voters reported, instead of listening and believing misinformation, our voters reported it to the Attorney General in our office so that we could counter them together, launch investigations the Attorney General did, and work to ensure that bad information didn't take root in our communities and impact voting or voting outcomes. So now we have to continue that same vigilance in the days ahead, while our election workers across the state work to count each and every valid ballot. We have to honor the work that went in today to making sure every vote got in, honor the work that went into throughout these past months to ensure every absentee ballot was delivered and received on time. And I ask you all to work together to respect that process. It's critical in the hours ahead that we work to ensure that we do not give space to anyone who attempts to make premature declarations about the outcome of any races in Michigan. So we're going to remain vigilant as votes are counted to ensure the democratic process unfolds as the law stipulates. While it is possible there will be races with ballot questions where results, even with minimal returns, are clear, our vigilance will be critical in any question of a close race. So I'm relying on all of you and voters alike in partnership with my office and out of respect for the will of the voters and the work of our election workers today, especially those tabulating ballots as we speak, to stand vigilant with us. Until the full unofficial count can be provided, we will continue to provide updates on the status of the tabulation process throughout the hours to come. That will include the number of outstanding ballots that still need to be counted. We have been and will continue to be fully transparent throughout this whole process. We will ensure that if misinformation is inevitably spread, that we quickly identify it for what it is, an attempt to undermine voters and others' confidence in our system, and we will confirm that when we have final results to share, it will be an accurate reflection of the will of the voters. So I want to thank again the clerks and the staff all across the state that made today such a success. I want to thank the members of my team who worked to facilitate everything that's happened today, and the partners we've had along the way, like the Detroit Pistons, like the Detroit Lions, like the athletes and corporate leaders, and our governor, and our attorney general, who share the belief that our democracy is at its strongest when every voice is heard and every vote is counted. And most importantly, I want to thank the millions of citizens who participated in our elections here in Michigan. And I want to leave you with a story of voters in Macomb County tonight. As the sun set today, this evening, supporters of both candidates for president gathered on the opposite sides of the street near an elementary school in Warren, shouting support for their candidate and disdain for the opposing side. After a while, however, a song broke out. People began singing God Bless America. And before long, both sides would come together, singing in unison, reflecting their common commitment to democracy, our country, and our future. So I want us all to be like those citizens in the hours ahead, in the days ahead. May we all come together in respect of the will of the voters, in Michigan and throughout the country, whatever that will may be. Thanks. Now you take a few questions.
Can you go over the anticipated number of absentee ballots and the number of people that voted today and the overall total?
Yes. Right now, The most recent data we have is that 3.26 million absentee ballots have been received and are beginning the process or already been tabulated. Now that number may increase as we get the final results, because remember, they could, as long as they were at the local clerk's office by 8 p.m. today, and 4 counties, we know 8 p.m. is 9 p.m. Eastern, they will count. And so we're still, so just want to emphasize that number may grow, but it may grow, it's not going to exceed 3.5 million, because that was the full number that was ultimately requested. But already that's about 93% of the 3.5 requested that have been returned. So that's very good. It shows that a lot of our concerns about ballots perhaps not getting in on time, while again there's still several thousand that that may be outstanding, but we by and large saw a high return rate, and that's a good thing. In terms of in-person turnout, we're going to know more in the hours ahead. We certainly can estimate 2 to 2.5 million citizens voted today. But that said, that number is also going to change and evolve. As I mentioned during our remarks, like many of you, I like data. I like numbers. And what I've seen now, this is the 4th election we've managed this year, a lot of numbers are going to become more clear in the hours ahead. And there have been elections already where I tried to give you data and numbers, and that ended up evolving and changing in the hours to come, or clarifying, perhaps I should say. So just know that's probably going to happen in the next few hours. I know we all want to get as much information as we can right now. We're going to keep giving you all the information that we've got at our disposal, and I'll keep putting it out there on social media in the hours ahead. But again, just want to recognize as well that the way we get our numbers is when local clerks get ballots or get information, they enter it into our statewide system. And so sometimes it takes time, and we'll continue again to update you as we go along. Yes. Yeah, I'm very happy to say that as we saw in Detroit, where we thought it would take 80 hours in Detroit to tabulate close to 180,000 absentee ballots that they'll have, they got through 120,000 today in 13 hours. That's really good. So, I'm confident that we'll have more of an update for Detroit in the morning. And the clerk noted that by the next 24 hours, she expects the full tabulation of every vote in Detroit to be complete. Detroit's our largest jurisdiction. And so we usually make estimates based on when they're done, because it's going to take them the longest, they have the most ballots. We know a lot of other jurisdictions are speeding through their tabulation, so I expect we'll have a very clear picture, if not a final picture, of the unofficial results from Michigan in the next 24 hours.
Madam Secretary, will this be the first time that absentee votes will exceed in-person votes?
Yes.
And how many total registered voters are there in the state of Michigan?
Just over 8 million registered voters in the state of Michigan.
This morning you cast your ballot in Detroit. This is the facility which went in a ballot box before, and then you come here and ballots are rolling in the boxes. Just your emotions of that.
I'm grateful for our sports partners who in Detroit really led the way. For sports teams across the country to play a pivotal role, a critical role in providing the resources we needed to run elections successfully this year. Whether it's providing personnel to make sure we can staff all of our precincts, providing a secure space to welcome ballots at the end of the night, or enabling voters to vote while visiting the Detroit Pistons facility, as I did this morning, and having celebrations around that. All of it is something that I hope will continue in the years ahead, and really underscores the work that went into today, which was truly a team effort. Yes.
Given the unprecedented nature of this year, are you satisfied with the rate of the vote that was coming in? Many groups we spoke to thought they'd be done by midnight, 1, 2-ish.
I fully expect that many local clerks will be fully done with their tabulation tonight. I also think we'll see it'll take 24 hours before we see a full unofficial tabulation, as I mentioned, from Michigan. All of that is a great thing because, as you know, based on math in our previous performance in August, we estimated Friday because it took 40 hours to do 1.6 million ballots, and we got twice that. Now it looks like more than twice that. In this election, we estimated 80 hours. But of course, over the past several months, we've worked to increase the number of high-speed ballot tabulators. We've worked to identify best practices like Oakland County and expand them throughout the state. And we worked to recruit more workers to ensure, like here in Detroit, we got thousands instead of hundreds as we're in past all the final data right now. That's just not how our system works. It's not really how any state's going to work when you can't, again, we can't tabulate ballots until it's marked as most ways. Yes. No, go ahead. Yeah.
When we see precincts reporting now, does that include the absentee ballots, or was that just their in-person and absentees coming later?
I haven't done a deep dive into what's being made public right now, so you've just been trying to keep the work happening. So I anticipate, so I don't have a specific answer, but I would say that I anticipate quite soon, if not already, you'll see absentee ballot numbers reported. I just haven't looked at what's been made public yet, so I can't say for sure. But the county clerk's websites that are making it public should perhaps provide that bifurcation. That said, I'm focused on, because the vast majority of voters voted absentee, I think we should all recognize that really any partial count that doesn't include absentees is not close to being a full reflection of that particular community.
So precincts possibly could report without absentee ballots if such came out?
Sure, that's possible, but again, what I'm seeing more of is a collection of both being reported. But again, I haven't, I've been over the past hour visiting the Detroit tabulation. Absentee county reports, I haven't been actually following, what data has been made public and all of those things. I've just been trying to make sure the process is running smoothly. But certainly, it's why I also caution patience, because no matter what, we know partial results, however they're defined, are what's coming out right now. Of that I'm sure. And we do have to wait until there's a full tabulation, particularly in any close race, before we have any sense of, any winner or loser. We know of a few robocalls. Well, I should first say, every time we heard of an instance of misinformation, we made it public so that people would know the truth. And we worked to get the truth out there. And then we also referred it to the Attorney General, who was quite vigilant as well at launching any investigations. And that's kind of how it's worked throughout this whole election season. So that said, what I can say with confidence is that the misinformation we identified, particularly through robocalls and texts, we identified and corrected, and we saw partners like many professional athletes who joined us in correcting and getting correct information out there, which we were very grateful for. And so there's no evidence that in any way, that it landed in a way that caused confusion or chaos or deterred people from voting. What I saw today was when misinformation hit our voters, they knew it was wrong, they reported it to us, and we were able to investigate to begin getting to the bottom of who was behind it. Yes.
We learned today that the Postal Service wasn't able to comply with this order about getting, ensuring that every absentee ballot that was in a processing center got out. Should those ballots be counted, what's the response to ballots that didn't get out today?
We're going to know much more in the hours and days ahead of that, how that particular issue with the Postal Service affected Detroit and affected Michigan. I can say a couple of things. One, the Attorney General was at the Detroit Processing Center and the Pontiac Center yesterday, actually with eyes on any ballots, any election mail that still had to be delivered, and was given every assurance that it would be delivered before polls close today. So you have to ask her for more information about that particular experience, but the assurance I got from her, the confidence I got from her, was that we would see any mail that was left moving, but we didn't see a significant amount of mail that was supposed to reach across in Michigan that was stuck or in any way delayed. What I've been looking at are the overall numbers, how many ballots have been sent out and how many have come back. And to have what we were at this morning, which is a 92% return rate, is actually much higher than we've been at in past elections. And so we're going to continue to track that, because we know again ballots are coming in at 8 o'clock today, and that's why I said we'll ultimately know more in the hours ahead about how many ballots got in, if any were delayed or should have gotten in. But that's why I also shared the example of Dane County. Yeah, for the challengers in Detroit and elsewhere throughout the state, I'll say I was gratified that most of the reports, not all the reports we got today, of observers in the polls, were that they observed, they watched, they took notes. There was no disruption, there was no record of disruption, which was very great to see. That said, we know Detroit in particular, and I think I would defer some specifics to Chris Thomas, who was particularly who's been in the absentee county board all day and very much closer to that process than I about it, how the challenges and the sort of details of them. But we do know that people there are, as he said earlier tonight, a lot of eyes on this process. I think transparency is a good thing. I think we've got enough protections in place to withstand that scrutiny. But we'll see more specifically how any challenges play out in the hours ahead. Certainly tonight there's going to be a lot of adjudications mentioned of those challenges, and we anticipate that throughout the day tomorrow we'll see that continue as well. And that's one of the reasons why I could be standing here saying we get Detroit school results in even sooner. But we know some of those challenges will take some time to work out, and that's why we're saying, and the clerk's saying, in the next 24 hours we'll see the results. Yes?
You mentioned the Trump supporters and the Biden supporters singing together. A lot of people thought this was going to be really a different scenario, that we were going to see violence at the polls possibly. Your thoughts on that?
I think that's the story of today, as far as I'm concerned. The story of today is there is extraordinary high levels of turnout, as there has been throughout this election season. In this election, there were extraordinary high numbers of new citizens, new people voting through registering to vote, and people, by and large, saw peacefulness, calmness in the precincts, and that's why I wanted to share that story as well, because I think we just need to be mindful of that in the days to come. That no matter what the result is of a particular election in any state, we all have to come together as a country and as a state and move forward. We've got a lot of challenges ahead of us, and I know I certainly will think about those citizens in Macomb County who we came together and united as one, singing "God Bless America," and I know and hope that many of us will take that same spirit into the hours and days ahead. Okay, one more question, anyone?
Any estimate on what the total voting percentage will be in Michigan?
No, we're still, I'm as curious as you are to know what that final number is going to be. I think, I've said we'll get between 5 and 5.5 million votes overall. We're on track to see that, which will put us at about 70 or 72% turnout, which is very good. But, a lot of that data is really going to play out in the hours ahead. So I'll be watching those numbers, and again, we'll be reporting out either on social media or I'll actually be doing 2 other media availabilities tomorrow to talk through any more details that need to come in. And just as we have every election this year, we'll continue to try to break down all the numbers and get you all the data you need to help get a full understanding and picture of the electorate in this election.
And do you know what our previous high water mark would have been?
Just over 5 million voted in 2008, and so I fully anticipate every data point we're seeing is that we're going to exceed all of our past turnout levels. And we already know in Detroit we're going to exceed the 2008 turnout. The Detroit clerk said that earlier tonight. So we are on track to see record-breaking turnout in Detroit and throughout the state. And exactly how record-breaking that will be remains to be seen, and we'll know more in the hours to come.
What would that percentage have been in 2008?
All of them off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I've been looking again, 5 to 5.5 million, I think will vote this year, and I will say every number we've gotten in has really underscored and reflected that higher turnout that we're expecting. So I think at the end of the day we'll see that, but I'll again join with all of you in being cautious and wait till we get the full numbers in. Yeah, one more question.
Sorry. You said over 8 million registered voters in Michigan. Do you know how many eligible voters are there?
We can get to those specific numbers.
It's census data.
Yeah, we'll get to those specific numbers. There's lots of different ways that that's estimated. I don't want to say anything incorrect at this point. So, okay, everyone, I know we're going to have a long night, a lot of hours and days ahead, so I'm sure I'll see you again soon. Thanks for being here tonight.
Folks, we will have some times if people want to do one-on-ones. If you could see Tracy in the back, and she can assist.
You want to do a one-on-one?
It's up to you.
Yeah, if we can. I'm still live right now, so we try to go.
Sure.
Okay. So,
Okay, great. So we're going to try and see if we can speak to Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. The big headlines here is this is the first time in Michigan history that more people have voted absentee than in person. Could be as many as 3.5 million people absentee, and somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million in person, which would bring our vote total to about 70%, an extraordinarily high number, but just how high we don't know. It sounds like the largest turnout in Michigan before was in 2008 when 5 million people voted. So we're going to see if we can go see the Secretary of State.
I'm not with you, and I'll grab my stuff too.
Right there.
We're still live.
We'll get you down.
I'm still live.
Get you in and out real quick.
Oh, excellent.
We're going one at a time.
Oh yeah.
Coming with you.
Where do you want us to wait?
Just right over here, and I'll send people down as we're ready.
Thanks.
All right. Well, do you want to break down what we heard tonight a little bit?
Sure. So Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson speaking here at Ford Field, talking about an extraordinary night. Some good news for people who are impatient. Initially, the Secretary of State thought that the vote totals would be known in Michigan on Friday. Now she's saying it's possible that we may know tomorrow night. That would be Wednesday night, which is pretty good because it took a while to get the votes counted in the primary, but it sounds like some processes have been made more efficient. There may be some more high-speed machines, and it sounds like the counting has been better staffed than it was during the primary. We heard the city clerk in Detroit say that during the primary, one of the problems was poll workers just left. They decided they didn't like it and they went home. Well, now you've seen more volunteers, you've seen city employees, you've seen employees of the Detroit Lions, and you've seen the Secretary of State do a lot to bolster the manpower, the very people who do the counting and the processing of the votes. So what we're looking at now, just to recap, 3.5 million absentee ballots were requested in Michigan. 3.3 million have already been received and are being counted. It's possible more of those that were requested will come in. Obviously, it couldn't be more than 200,000 more, but that is a huge number. The number of people who have voted in person is between 2 and 2.5 million. This is the first time in Michigan history that absentee voters have exceeded in-person voters. Now, one reason may be the very aggressive effort by the Secretary of State and various groups on the left and the right to let people know what their rights were to vote absentee. This is one of the first elections where you don't need a reason to get an absentee ballot. Everyone in Michigan is assumed to be eligible for an absentee ballot just for the asking. And so that certainly has increased the number of people voting that way. And again, we have a pandemic where people are worried about congregating in spaces. One of the things that as someone who lives in Detroit and as a Michigander can be proud of is that the long lines we've seen around the country of people waiting to vote was not a problem here in Michigan. The Secretary of State saying that anecdotally throughout the state there were not long lines. We certainly didn't see many in Detroit, which means people were able to safely vote, those who chose to vote in person. We have 8 million registered voters in Michigan. We do not know how many people may vote out of that number. It's looking like it'll be somewhere around 5.5 to 6 million voters. The Secretary of State estimates that'll be somewhere north of 70%. Again, an extraordinary turnout when we see elections in America, somewhere around 50%, even in major elections like a presidential race. So the turnout, historic. In 2008, the highest turnout to date, 5 million people voted. And the Secretary of State ended her remarks recounting a story from Macomb County in Warren, where people who supported Joe Biden were on one side of the street, people who support Donald Trump were on the other side of the street, both jostling, both exchanging, we can imagine some heated remarks, but came together to sing God Bless America. We didn't witness it, we'll take her word for it, but a pretty nice way to end what's been a contentious election. Sort of reminds me of the story from World War I where the Germans and the English played soccer in the battlefield. Luckily, there was no shooting. In fact, one of the things that was very interesting to hear the Secretary of State say is that there seemed to be no problems at the polls in terms of contentious behavior, in terms of intimidation, in terms of people feeling like they were being driven away. Because you may recall there was a lot of talk before today about open carry and people bringing their weapons to the polling place. The Secretary of State tried to stop people from bringing their guns to polling places. The Attorney General tried to support that effort. The courts ultimately rejected that. But it sounds like the issue of people coming to the polls to stop people from voting did not surface today. We can be very grateful for that, and hopefully that's a sign of peaceful things to come. What else can I tell you? One of the things I heard the Secretary of State say is that polling places were islands of calm. So that's always a good thing. And she praised people like the Detroit Lions and the Detroit Pistons who made their facilities and their personnel available to help make sure that every vote is processed, is counted, and is secured in case there is a recount. That's a very important issue. We did have a recount in 2016. It wasn't a complete recount, but if you're going to recount the ballots, you want to make sure you know where they are and they're secured. So good news tonight from the Secretary of State. We're hoping to speak to her in a moment, but so far the word from Detroit and from our Michigan Secretary of State is that this was a pretty smooth election, which is something that we weren't sure was going to happen. So,
All right, thanks so much, MLL Rick.
Mandy, thanks. We'll be back.